Hey, welcome to DVR Club. I'm Editor-in-Chief Josh Modell. This is
Senior Editor Sean O'Neill.
And we will be talking today about the final episode of Mad Men Forever and Ever until they reboot it with all new actors in, I think, 18 months is what they're planning on. So Sean, final episode ever. We're going to start off with bottom storylines. Everybody who's not Don Draper, and kind of touch on whether we feel like their endings were good. I think we both agree that they were nice and tidy.
I think we agree that they were endings. Yeah.
They were endings, that's true. They did all feel like endings.
Yeah.
Joan, I enjoyed. I thought last week she was going to ride off into the sunset and it had to do with a man, which is like satisfying and yet also kind of unsatisfying. But now she's sort of broken away from him, started her own business with a great name.
Yeah, Holloway Harris. I think the idea that she was going to start a company with Peggy Olsen, Harris Olsen, I think that was a little bit of a tease of a fan service thing. That's something that people have been wanting since the show launched. But ultimately, I think that was the right decision for Peggy to stay at McCann and for Joan to go off on her own.
Then we got Pete and Trudy, who get their happy ending on walking onto a private jet, which I'm fine with, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Pete is actually the character that grew the most over this series. Right. I mean, if you remember in the first season, I think it was Don that said to Pete, you keep this up, you keep treating people like this, and you're going to die in that office. You're just going to be another middle management guy with a little bit of hair that nobody cares about. And he kind of, at the end of the show, he just kind of becomes this nicer guy. Like he realizes that he shouldn't be stepping out on Trudy. Well, like who would cheat on Trudy? But he should realize he shouldn't be stepping out on your wife, and he should be nice to the people you work with. And that little speech he gives to Peggy is such a huge change from the way he used to treat her.
I'm telling you, it will happen. They just have to get used to the idea. Someday, people are going to brag that they worked with you.
So another person who gets to grow and we get to like. Roger Sterling also gets a happy ending, as far as we know.
I can't see him and Marie staying together for that long.
I don't care. They're frozen. They're frozen in amber, eating lobster, drinking champagne, and he's so charming that I will excuse all of his follies. And then Peggy, which that was the one thing in this episode that kind of felt like a little bit of a cheat to me. That great love story happened, just wham happened.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the groundwork for that relationship was laid really early on.
Sure.
I think she and Stan have always kind of, had been there for each other, and I think it's pretty obvious that he has those feelings for her, from the beginning. But I agree, it was pretty rushed. But then you have this great scene of her kind of like logically working through love, which for Peggy is a perfect way for her character to fall in love. Like she's actually rationalizing it out. That
it happened felt a little rushed. The way it happened, I actually thought was great. And really liked it. I loved him putting the phone down and rushing up to the office. So
it was a bit of a rom-com kind of ending, but
Mad Men's earned it, I guess. So those are the bottom storylines. Everybody's sort of pretty nicely wrapped up in a bow, which leads us to top storyline. Of course, the main character of the show, Don Draper, who goes through some trials and tribulations again this week. And what did you think of the sort of lead up to his arriving at this commune type place?
Well, I think the whole show has been about him struggling to reconcile these two people within himself, this Dick Whitman side of himself that kind of longs for, the freedom and, California and this bohemian side, I guess, and like within him that he's always sort of expressed through, fucking around and dating other women and stuff. But then I think this last episode, in my opinion, I think you saw him sort of reconciling those two selves within each other. I know that you kind of disagree.
To me, the lead up to it was kind of important because it was everyone in his life sort of giving him permission or forcing him away. Like, we don't need you. Betty saying, the kids don't need you, which in a way was sort of convenient. Like, oh, well, I don't have to have this responsibility because Betty is telling me no. And Sally doesn't need him. Peggy doesn't need him anymore, and I thought it was telling that she gets that advice from Stan where he says, Don always does this, and he always comes back.
I think Don finding out that these people don't need him, and that's sort of like he suspects this entire time that they don't need him, and that's why he's always sort of felt unloved. I mean, when he talks to Peggy, he's like sarcastically like, oh, did things fall apart without me? And he already knows the answer. Like he's saying, well, basically, no, they wouldn't have fallen apart. So I think he's kind of always felt like he doesn't exist. He's just like this, fake identity. And like if he disappeared tomorrow, nobody would notice. And so when he hears this guy in this group encounter session basically saying everything that he feels about, him being within this refrigerator and everybody else outside of him having the actual happiness that he just knows how to project and knows how to like describe and engineer for other people, I think that really connects with him on a deep emotional level.
Do you think the guy, when he was giving the speech about being in the refrigerator and being happy that somebody looked at him and then they didn't pick him, do you think Don anthropomorphized him as a bottle of Coke at that moment and then hugged him? Or do you think he didn't didn't occur to him quite yet, maybe? Which leads us to Speculation Corner, which is kind of what Sean was referring to before the end of the show, where we see Don doing yoga, and for a very brief, 10 seconds, I thought, oh man, the show is going out like this. We don't get any ending for Don, we just get this. And then of course we hear the actual bell go off in his head and see this Coke commercial, this very famous real life Coke commercial, which to me, but apparently not the rest of the internet, was so clear that Don then went back and wrote this commercial and it changed advertising forever.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees.
I think some people can look at it and have looked at it as he's actually having this real spiritual epiphany, but then the ad itself is like this cynical commentary, like, oh, but this is what advertising does to those spiritual epiphanies. And it's not necessarily that he created that ad. That's one interpretation. I personally, and I think you do too, believe that he actually did go back to McCann and create that ad, that he realized that that's what he's good at.
There was an actual bell that went off. I mean, I think
Yeah, and it's funny because that bell is also really reminiscent of the Sopranos finale. It's a show that Matt Weiner also worked on.
Sure.
That last scene in the ice cream parlor where the bell keeps going off and Tony keeps looking up. I mean, when David Chase wrote about his interpretation of the finale, like he mentioned that bell as sort of like a transformative experience. It's so I think that's really meaningful. My opinion is that he did create that ad, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't learn anything. I think a lot of people that don't want him to have created that ad don't want to feel like they wasted their time with Don going through all this sort of like, Buddhist getting rid of his stuff and like becoming this different person. I think the idea is he did become a different person, but he's learned to reconcile that, like I said, that Dick Whitman inner self with this Don Draper image, and he's learned to create advertising from a more pure place. He's not doing it as a cynical put on. It's like something that's actually coming from inside him.
I like that, and I want to be that optimistic, but I feel like what the show is telling me is that Don is just back to his old cycle, and he's going to have this great advertising success doing this Coke campaign, which is obviously huge, and then 5 years later he'll be in Utah trying to drive a car real fast again and dumping whoever he's with and still sort of soul searching.
This whole show I don't think is about huge character growth. I think that's not what life is about. I don't think anybody like suddenly wakes up one day and they're completely different. I mean, I think it's all a little bit of a put on. I think that's what Don has always recognized about a man, and being a man is kind of like you bring this sort of image, you project this image for yourself, and he's always backslid. He always tries new things and always slides back to who he actually is. And I think that's it's cyclical. Obviously, the credits of the show, you see he loses everything, and at the end he's right back where he started on the couch. I mean, that's how the show has set you up to expect this entire journey to go. But I don't think that discredits him maybe having a minor epiphany and maybe coming forward with a little more security and feeling a little more absolved and a little more content. I mean, it's all about like where you find contentment and little bits of happiness.
And it's nice that it left us with a little bit, but not the whole thing. Like, I'm glad we're not flashing forward to Don doing whatever. I'm glad that it didn't leave us, without that Coke ad, obviously, because I think it would have been a shitty episode. But I'm glad that it sort of dangles us a little bit. And I think, to go against my own point, like, if we're judging by every other character on the show that we talked about at the beginning, everybody had some growth. So why not think that Don can too? I'm going to picture him happy now forever. Happily married, he's got a new kids, he walks into work every day with his lunchbox. No, that's not true. And that's not our Don.
And then he steals some money and gets on a plane and becomes D.B. Cooper, right?
Oh, God. Did anyone of you actually believe that's where this was going? They already did it on Justified. Anyway, Mad Men, great finale to a great series, I thought.
Great series.
I think
yeah.
it's.
I'm gonna miss it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think we all are.
So we won't be talking about it here next week on DVR Club.
That's the saddest part of this entire thing.
I'm Josh Modell. This is
Sean O'Neill.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.